208. The following story is an event which happened to my mother and her immediate family towards the end of the 70s when she was around 6 or 7 years old. Please bear with me, as this story is rather long. If anyone knows anything or has any information about it, my mom's family and I would appreciate it. At the time, my mom lived at the house we refer to as 208. I'll not disclose the exact location, as I'm sure you will understand, but I will say that it was in Spunden, Derby. She lived there with her father, mother, and 2 brothers, one older and one younger. It was around 1966 when my grandparents first moved into 208. They would have been about 20 years of age then. It was during their housewarming party that one woman was leaving and had gone to retrieve her coat from the banister of the spiral staircase, where she had placed it at the beginning of the party. As she did so, she looked up to see the body of a man slumped over the banister further up. This man was only seen once, and it was found that 208 was built on the site of the old hanging tree that was once there in Spunden. As I said, after this, there were no further sightings of this man, but it seemed that after this, a shrouded figure would appear in places when the members of the family would, for example, look into mirrors. Let me describe to you a little about 1 or 2 of the rooms in 208. My mother's bedroom had an adjoining playroom, which is where the attic door was located. When my mom was telling me this, she explained that the attic door was one which had small locks on either side, and when these are unlocked, you could push up the attic door and slide it so it was still up inside the attic. Several times, the family would wake up to find the attic door had been pushed up, but they blamed it on the wind. Another time they discovered it was open, they saw that birds had gotten into the loft, and so they had a new, perhaps more logical explanation for the attic door being undone. Because my grandmother hates birds in the house, my grandfather got 2 metal brackets and fixed the attic door shut so nothing could get up there. The night he did this, he slept in the playroom, which, as I mentioned, joined onto my mother's, and there were no problems, so he moved back to sleep with my grandmother. But the following morning, after he'd slept in his own bed, he discovered the door had been pushed or pulled back up, so it was in the attic with a bracket still attached. At this point, the family called in a man, a medium of some sort, who went up into the loft with a black book. My grandfather could hear him chanting in a foreign language, which I assumed to have been Latin, but I'm not sure. Eventually, the medium returned from the attic, looking white-faced. He told my grandfather that they would have no more trouble with the spirit. This was true. My grandfather only saw the medium once more, well, twice I suppose. The first was in the local pub. On this occasion, the medium refused to acknowledge my grandfather at all and would not speak. The second was when the news came that the medium had been admitted to hospital and my grandfather had gone to visit him. It was then that the medium had told my granddad, "It's in me. I haven't got the strength to get rid of it." The medium was later discharged from the hospital. The nurses believed him to have some sort of mental illness, but shortly afterwards, the medium died from what I believe to be unknown circumstances as he was crossing a bridge somewhere in Derby. It appears the spirit was finally at rest after it had claimed a life. Thank you so much for reading the story. If anybody has any more information about the medium 208, the old hanging tree, or even who the spirit may have been, then my family and I would be very appreciative. Thank you again for taking the time to read this. "306. This story will be a bit long, so I sincerely apologize beforehand. 306 was my first university share house. It was on the main road and pretty run down, and I'd say dodgy. The front fence of the house was falling apart. You walk in the front door and are met with a long hallway with 7 bedrooms. The hallway ends at a kitchen with a laundry and bathroom to the opposite side of the kitchen. Straight across from the hallway in the kitchen is a door that takes you to a narrow hallway with 2 bedrooms opposite each other. That is the house. I moved in with 2 friends, but after a few months there was me, my best friend M, her gay, very sensitive to the paranormal cousin Dan, 2 of our friends, GK and Duke, and my boyfriend Ahmed. I use name to make the following story easier. The house had 9 rooms. Although it wasn't big enough to hold them all, the other 3 rooms had students whom I didn't know. When we first moved in, everything was fine for a while, until early one morning at around 2 a.m., Emily felt sick and had to use the bathroom. Our rooms were opposite each other in the small hallway near the kitchen. I was asleep when she came knocking on my door. I let her in, and she looked terrified. She told me she went to the bathroom, but saw a black shadow near the long hallway. I wasn't sure if I believed her, but I got up and we walked into the kitchen, peering down the hallway. Just then, we both heard the sounds of keys falling and hitting the ground with that loud jingle sound. We both turned around and saw a black shadow dart across the small hall. We dismissed it and went to bed. The next night, we were all out in the yard drinking when 2 guys, who we don't know, walked in through our gate. Now, this area near the university is pretty dodgy, so we were just going to kick them out. They told us they were friends with Duke. One of the guys walked into the house, while the other stayed outside. He said he knew the guy who lived in the house before they turned it into a share house. At that stage, it had been a normal house with 3 bedrooms. He told us he had died of a heart attack in the bedroom, and that's why they came to visit. That's how they met. That's what they said. He also mentioned how his friend, the one who died, and that guy's wife would complain about the house being haunted. Strange things would happen, and Dan, the sensitive one to paranormal, would comment on the bad feeling the house had. I awoke one morning and could see a white glow above my bed. I didn't feel threatened, and there were no source of light for a reflection at all. I rolled over and went back to sleep. A lot of stuff like glowing orbs, black shadows, noises, it all happened a lot. It just became a normal thing in the house. But later on, it got so bad, me and Emily figured that the noises couldn't be paranormal as they were too loud. We were in the kitchen talking and having a good time. Ghosts were the last things in our mind, when all of a sudden Emily closed the door that connected the kitchen with me and Emily's room. I asked her why, and she said that she didn't know. She just got a feeling that she should. A while passed, I can't remember how long, when we heard big, loud footsteps. It was coming up the small hallway near me and Emily's room. We both froze. It was loud and very obvious as to someone was walking towards the kitchen. Thank God Emily closed and locked the door. We grabbed whatever weapon we could and slowly walked to the door. Emily called the rest of the housemates who were in university at the time, and we decided to go towards the front door now. Emily stopped in front of one of the rooms and told me she saw the black shadow again. We peered into the room, and when I turned, I saw another room's door handle twisting, although no one was at home. We bolted towards the bathroom to lock ourselves in, while inside we heard footsteps and noises. The cops came. Emily had hung up on our friends when we screamed, and the boys called the cops. They searched the house and found no one. No way to the hallway near my and Emily's room. I'll stop here, but we saw, felt, and heard all these things a lot of times. Cops came many times as they were so real. We thought people had actually broken in. Daniel cleansed the house. many times, but the feelings and sounds would always still come back. We thought that maybe the house stood on bad land, as although someone had died in the house, he had also claimed before he died that it was haunted. We did do research and found news reports on heart attack inside the house. Any ideas what could be wrong with this place at all? Thank you. Country horrors. I was 15 years old when this occurred. It was in an old farmhouse in Burford, Ontario. I went to visit my friend and his family for a week in the summer of 2001. They had recently bought a farmhouse that needed some work. The house itself had some disturbing history. The previous owner had hung himself in the basement of the house some 6 years ago. When I say basement, it's more like a cellar. It has no entry from the inside the house, only from the outside. Right beside the main entry to the house had also suffered a fire before this owner, which he never fixed. The house had split into 2 sections to get to the other section, aka what he called the burnt rooms. You had to go down a long hallway upstairs, which had 3 rooms inside it. One was my friend's room, the other a bathroom, and the third the burnt room. At the end of the hallway was a door which led to the second part of the house. I only went into the second part of the house once, but it was destroyed. My friend's parents were currently trying to fix it up, but there was still a lot of fire damage. As the week went on, they told me the stories of some of the past. 2 families had shared the house, when one night, the second portion caught fire and killed a husband, his wife, and their son. Now in the burnt room in the hallway, when my friend's parents cleaned it out, they tore out a wall, and behind the wall, they found a can of arsenic with a kitchen spoon in it. Well, when I stayed there, I had the pleasure of hearing what I thought to be BS stories, bangings, voices, and odd feelings. One night, we were in my friend's room getting ready to go to bed, listening to music fairly loudly, but we were so far away from everyone else, it didn't matter. We heard a very loud and abrupt knock on the door. We turned down the music, opened the bedroom door, no one was there. We figured it was just my friend's brother messing with us. Then, it happened again. We looked again, no one. I decided to stand by the door, and when his brother knocked, I would open the door right away. So sure enough, they knocked, I opened, no one there. So I looked in the hallway, and the door to the burnt section was wide open. Me and my friend ran downstairs, and everyone was in the living room. And my friend's dad told us to stop goofing off and running around, but we weren't goofing. We went back up to his room with his brother, played the music, and the knock started again. This time, we just turned down the music. You could hear someone running and giggling and slammed the door at the end of the hallway to the burnt rooms. And not to be outdone, my friend, his brother and I all slept in that room the next night and heard someone in the burnt room shuffling around for about 20 minutes. The most terrifying experience of my life. Creepy experience at CNC Area. The former West Virginia Ordnance Works, WVOW, was an explosive manufacturing facility constructed for the sole purpose of producing 720,000 tons of TNC per day. It was constructed on 8,323 acres along the east bank of the Ohio River, along State Route 62, 6 miles north of Point Pleasant, West Virginia. From 1942 to 1945, the West Virginia Ordnance Works, WVOW, manufactured explosive for use in munitions and explosives for the war effort. Although owned by DoD, WVOW was operated by a private company to produce TNC, When it closed in 1945, WVOW was declared surplus, and the structures were salvaged or disposed. The former West Virginia Ordnance Works is on the National Priorities List, and work is being done there by the Huntington District of the U.S. Army Corps for Engineers. Anyways, the CNC area hasn't actually manufactured TNT since World War II ended. It is now part of the McClintock Wildlife Management Area, and the igloos are above-ground concrete bunkers where the TNT was stored. They're designed in a way that planes passing over cannot tell they're there, and that if one should explode, it wouldn't set off a chain reaction. Most of the igloos are now privately owned or owned by the Army, and out of hundreds, only a few are accessible, and only 3 of these are open to tourists. After the war, it was a popular place for private enterprises to use in storing TNT and related stuff, and to this day, there's a good chance that some of the igloos still are being implemented for that. However, in the 1980s, the whole area was added to the government's Superfund list after fishermen reported a red bubbling goo coming up from the ponds. Allegedly, a lot of the bunkers were supposed to have been cleaned out, but again, who knows? The area's real claim to fame, however, comes from Mothman. The first reported sighting of Mothman came from the area's North Power Plant, which was torn down in the 90s. The next night, some locals went out to the bunker area to try and scare people out of looking for Mothman when they allegedly encountered him themselves. In addition to Mothman, many other areas around the property are said to be haunted, especially the area around the present-day shooting range, where there are no less than 2 murders taking place there in recent history. However, my story comes from the area around the old igloos. On a whim one summer night in 2008, my friend and I went exploring the TNT area in Point Pleasant, known for its Mothman fame. We checked out the accessible igloos many times, only 3 of which were actually opened, but he wanted to show me some pallets, drums, and other debris that had recently been placed in front of a few of the privately owned igloos, which were located down a different trail than the one that held the open igloos. This time of year, there were gates blocking off the small roads, so you have to take the trail by foot. We had 2 flashlights, and the moon was really bright, so the trail was well lit. We went down the trail and got to see 3 igloos, but then the trail was cut off by a small stream that was overflowing, so we turned back around. Near the first igloo, the one closest to the car, I smelt what I thought was a dead animal. I didn't say anything because even though the smell was really strong, and I didn't smell it on our trip in, we were in the middle of a wildlife area. It's only natural to smell a dead animal sometimes. A few steps later, we were back to where we had parked the car. To get back to the car, we had to go around a big farm gate, which was no problem, except I'm a klutz. I got my pants stuck on a weed or something, so I was holding onto the gate's pole with both hands, trying to shake myself free. My friend was laughing at me, and I was laughing but cursing, staring down at the ground, trying to figure out why I was so tangled up. In my peripheral vision, I saw a form come towards me from my left side, the side closest to freedom. I put their arm on my shoulder to steady me. At first, I thought it was my friend, who had somehow managed to slip behind me and was trying to help me out. Then it clicked that something was really not right. It wasn't exactly tunnel vision, but somehow I seemed to subconsciously block out everything around me and could only focus on this shape in front of me, and it seemed like the whole scene was shot in movie mode, as if I were watching it on TV, not standing there. I could only see the side and back area of the figure. It was a younger male wearing a white t-shirt with tan skin and not jet black hair, but really dark brown, cut short but longer on the top than on the sides. It stood about 6 feet and wasn't very muscular, just average built. if not maybe on the slim side. What clicked was, the friend I was with was wearing a gray sleeveless shirt and is heavily tattooed with full sleeves on both arms. He stands at about 6'5" and is a bigger guy, fairly muscular, with long light brown hair. This was definitely not him, especially since after I freed myself, I whipped around and he was about a foot behind me on the wrong side of the gate still. I snapped back around to see what did help me and it was gone. I didn't even say anything really until we got back safely in the car and started down the road, and I told him what I saw. He swears he didn't see anything and knows that I have a history of seeing things that most people can't see, and saw how excited yet shaken I was. He believed that I at least thought I saw something. He said something to the effect of maybe whatever was there was warning us not to go down that path. To me, that didn't make any sense, since I had only experienced it as we were leaving. So the first thing I said was the first thing that popped into my head: he didn't want us to leave. That opened up a whole other discussion, a bit of a fictitious one, about there possibly being a body buried back there somewhere. The CNC area has seen its fair share of murders and body dumping, so it wouldn't be completely unheard of. I mentioned that there was definitely something dead back there, referencing to that horrid stench that I had smelled just previous to seeing the apparition. Again, my friend swears he didn't smell anything, which I thought was odd, because the stench was so overpowering. But now looking back, maybe it was an introduction to what was going to happen. I already told him that if a dead body shows up, don't bother to tell me about it. Instead, I just like to continue on thinking I was either hallucinating or saw a residual image of an event that's probably happened before in that very same spot. Two legend trippers out there exploring the igloos, chick gets caught, and boy comes to save her, or whatever. If you want, you can visit my personal paranormal website for more of my hauntingly odd experiences, plus historical information on many of the famous hotspots in the tri-state area.